The first thing Sophie Caldwell said to me after 7 years was not hello. It was not, Grant Walker, you got tall, which people in my hometown still said, even though I had stopped growing at 17. It was not, welcome back. She found me beside the ring toss booth at the Maple Ridge Harvest Fair, holding a paper tray of funnel cake like a man with no larger ambitions, and said, "Why didn't you ever answer my letter?" I looked at her, powdered sugar on my thumb, my heart doing something embarrassing and athletic inside my chest. "Sophie?" Her smile flickered, not disappeared, just flickered like a porch light deciding whether I deserved to come in. "You remember my name? That's a start." I was 25 years old, a junior architect in Columbus, back in Maple Ridge for one weekend because my sister had guilted me into helping with the fair's old-timers raffle table. I had spent the last 6 years telling myself I had outgrown this town, outgrown the cornfields, the gossip, the football trophies in diner windows, and the particular ache of being a quiet kid who wanted a girl so badly he forgot how to form sentences around her. Then Sophie Caldwell stood in front of me in a cream sweater, dark jeans, and boots dusty from the fairgrounds, and every adult achievement I had collected suddenly felt like a receipt I couldn't return. She was not the girl from my memory, not exactly. In high school, Sophie had been all motion, ponytail swinging, paint on her hands, laughing too loud in the library because rules seemed to bore her. Now she had the same dark curls cut just below her shoulders, the same warm brown eyes. But there was a steadiness to her that made me nervous in a different way. She looked like someone who had learned how much her softness cost and decided to keep it anyway. I wiped my thumb on a napkin. "What letter?" Her eyebrows lifted. "Wow. No, I mean, what letter?" She looked past me at the Ferris wheel turning slowly against the pale September sky. Kids shrieked from the top. Somewhere behind us, a man announced livestock awards over a crackling speaker like he was narrating the end of civilization. Sophie folded her arms. "Okay, either you're a better actor than you were in Mrs. Dunleavy's drama elective, or you really don't know. I was a tree in that play. You were a very tense tree. I had range. You had bark." And there it was, the old rhythm. It hit me harder than I expected, that easy little exchange, because I hadn't realized how much I missed being seen by someone who remembered the awkward version of me and didn't use it as a weapon. I laughed, and Sophie's expression softened before she seemed to catch herself. "Grant," she said, quieter now, "I wrote you after graduation." I stared at her. The fair kept moving around us, bright and loud. A little boy ran by with a balloon shaped like a dinosaur. Two women from my mother's church pretended not to stare and failed with passion. "You wrote me?" I asked. Sophie nodded once. 3 pages, front and back. In blue ink because my black pen died halfway through, and I thought that was tragic enough to mention. Something tightened behind my ribs. After graduation, I had left Maple Ridge like the town was on fire. Not because I hated it, because I hated who I had been in it. The scholarship to Ohio State felt like a door swinging open, and I ran through before anyone could ask me to stay. Especially Sophie. Because Sophie had been the girl I never asked to prom. The girl I helped carry boxes for during the senior art show. The girl who fell asleep on my shoulder during the bus ride back from state finals, then woke up and pretended she hadn't, while I pretended my entire nervous system hadn't changed religion. "You never said anything," I said. She gave a small laugh, but it had no humor in it. That's usually the point of a letter. I never got it. Her eyes searched mine. I hated how badly I wanted her to believe me. The truth was, my life back then had been a series of things I didn't say. My dad lost his job sophomore year and found bourbon like it had been waiting for him. My mother covered for everyone until covering became her whole personality. I became useful, quiet, reliable, the kind of boy teachers trusted and girls like Sophie smiled at in hallways without ever realizing he went home and replayed it for an hour. The summer after graduation, I packed 2 duffel bags, hugged my mother too quickly, and left before I could change my mind. "I checked the mailbox every day for 2 weeks," Sophie said. That landed in me like a dropped glass. "You waited for an answer?" Her chin lifted, but her voice thinned. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I stopped because there wasn't a clean word for it. Sorry felt too small. Stupid felt too large and too accurate. A teenage girl in a marching band hoodie bumped into Sophie from behind, and Sophie stepped forward on instinct. I caught her elbow before she stumbled into me, just a light touch, but it was enough to make both of us go still. Her sweater was soft under my fingers. Her perfume was something clean and faintly citrus, nothing like memory and somehow exactly like it. You okay? I asked. She looked down at my hand on her arm, then back up at me. Still catching me, huh? My throat went dry. In 11th grade, she had slipped off the stage during set painting, and I caught her before she cracked her head on the orchestra pit. For weeks afterwards, she called me Walker, Texas Ranger, even though we were in Ohio, and I had never thrown a punch in my life. You were always falling off things, I said. You were always hovering underneath like a handsome insurance policy. I blinked. She blinked too, like she hadn't meant to let that word out. Handsome. At 17, I would have combusted on the spot. At 25, I handled it with maturity and grace by dropping my napkin. Sophie's mouth twitched. I bent to pick it up, grateful for the excuse to look anywhere but at her face. When I straightened, she was watching me in a way that made the fair noise fade around the edges. I should probably go, she said, though she didn't move. Are you here with someone? The question came out too fast. Her smile returned, smaller but real. That was almost subtle. I've had funnel cake for lunch. My judgment's compromised. No, she said. I'm not here with someone. I tried not to show how relieved I was, and failed just enough for her to notice. What about you? She asked. No, just my sister making me sell raffle tickets to retired men who all claim they dated Miss Mapleridge in 1978. That sounds emotionally rich. It's mostly quarters and lies. She laughed, and the sound went straight through me. For one dangerous second, we were not strangers with 7 missing years between us. We were two people standing close enough that her shoulder almost brushed my chest, smiling like the past had been waiting politely behind a curtain. Then Sophie reached into the canvas tote on her shoulder. I almost didn't come over, she said. My stomach dipped. Why did you? Because I saw you laughing with Mr. Jensen at the tractor display, and I got mad. At Mr. Jensen? At myself. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and soft at the edges, protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. For still wondering. I looked at the paper. My name was on the front. Grant Walker. Written in blue ink. The sight of it made my skin go cold. You kept it? I asked. The copy, she said. I was dramatic, not careless. I gave a weak laugh. Sophie. She held it between us, not quite offering it yet. The original came back to me 3 weeks after I mailed it. What do you mean, came back? Her eyes didn't leave mine. It was marked return to sender, she said, and across the back someone had written, Don't contact me again. The Ferris wheel creaked above us. The announcer called another raffle number. My sister waved at me from across the walkway, then froze when she saw who I was talking to. I couldn't breathe right. Sophie, I said slowly, I swear to you I never wrote that. Her fingers tightened around the plastic sleeve. I know, she whispered. I stared at her. She looked past my shoulder toward the raffle table where my sister's face had gone pale. Because 5 minutes ago, Sophie said, your sister saw me holding this and said, Oh God, he still doesn't know. My sister had the survival instincts of a possum in headlights. She took one look at me, one look at Sophie, and immediately bent over the raffle drum as if the winning ticket might contain a tunnel out of Maple Ridge. Clara, I called. She flinched. Sophie slipped the letter back into her tote, careful as if it were a pressed flower or a small explosive. Grant, she said, you don't have to do this here. Apparently I did it here 7 years late. Her mouth softened. That was almost poetic. I'm furious. It improves my vocabulary. We started toward the raffle table. Clara, 2 years younger than me and 5 times better at getting people to confess their secrets, suddenly looked like she might confess to crimes she hadn't committed just to speed things along. Hey, she said weakly. Funny story. Is it? I asked. No. Sophie stopped beside me close enough that the back of her hand brushed mine. It steadied me more than it should have. Clara swallowed. I didn't write it. The anger in my chest shifted shape. Then who did? She glanced toward the row of food trucks, the Ferris wheel, the families pushing strollers through hay dust. Mom found the letter first. For a second, I heard nothing but the crackling loudspeaker. My mother had always been tender in public and terrified in private. She loved me, I knew that. She also loved control because control felt safer than honesty. She opened it? I asked. Clara winced. I don't know. I was 16. I just remember her holding an envelope with Sophie's name on the return address. She said you needed a clean break, that you'd finally gotten out, and girls from home would only pull you back. Sophie's face went still. I turned to her. That is not what you were. I know, she said, but there was an old bruise in her voice. Clara's eyes filled. I told her it was wrong. I did. But Dad was bad that summer, and she was Mom. I thought maybe she just threw it away. I didn't know she sent it back with that message until Sophie came by our booth today and I saw the copy. You could have told me, I said. I was scared, Clara whispered. And then you were gone, and every time you came home, you looked like you were holding yourself together with duct tape. I'm sorry. The apology should have gone somewhere in me. Instead, it landed on top of 7 years of silence and skidded. Sophie touched my wrist. Not a grab, not a plea. Just 2 fingers warm against my pulse. Grant, she said quietly, come walk with me. I looked at my sister. Clara wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand, miserable and ashamed. I wasn't done being angry. I wasn't done with my mother either. But Sophie was standing beside me after thinking for 7 years that I'd rejected her in the cruelest possible way, and she was still reaching for me. So, I chose her. Okay, I said. We left the raffle table behind and followed the edge of the fairgrounds toward the animal barns, where the noise softened into goat bleats and children arguing over caramel apples. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence was not empty. It was full of everything we had lost. Finally, Sophie said, for the record, my letter was not a desperate attempt to trap you in Maple Ridge and make you raise chickens. That's disappointing. I look good with chickens. You look like a man who would apologize to a chicken for taking its egg. I would. It's polite. She laughed, and the tightness behind my ribs eased. We stopped near the old covered bridge at the back of the fairgrounds, where strings of yellow lights had been hung for the evening square dance. The creek below moved slow and brown over flat stones. In high school, this bridge had been where couples went to make out and where I went once, tragically, to eat a corn dog alone. Sophie leaned on the railing. I told you in the letter that I liked you? My heart gave one hard, clean strike. I mean, I tried to make it sound sophisticated, she added. I used the phrase, in case you ever wondered, which I thought was very casual and adult. I stared at her profile, the curve of her cheek, the curl tucked behind her ear, the little line between her brows like she was bracing for impact. I wondered every day, I said. She turned. There it was. The truth, finally stepping out into daylight. I was crazy about you, I admitted. Completely. Pathetically. I used to take the long way to chemistry because it passed the art room. Her lips parted. You did? Every Tuesday and Thursday, sometimes Monday, if I was feeling emotionally reckless. A smile trembled on her mouth. I thought you were just punctual. I was punctual about pining. She laughed again, but this time her eyes shone. I stepped closer, close enough that the sleeve of my jacket brushed her sweater. I didn't answer because I never got the chance. But if I had, Sophie, if I had read that letter, I would have written back so fast the mailbox would have smoked. That's a bold claim from a tense tree. I've grown. I noticed. The words slipped between us, soft and heated. My gaze dropped to her mouth before I could stop it. When I looked up, she had noticed that too. For a moment, neither of us moved. The bridge lights flickered on overhead one by one, turning her hair copper at the edges. Then Sophie reached into her tote again and pulled out the plastic sleeve. Do you want to read it? She asked. Yes, I said. Then, after a breath, but not yet. Her brows lifted. I don't want our first real conversation to be with 17-year-old you. I want this you. My voice roughened. If that's okay. The way she looked at me then nearly undid me. It's okay, she said. A cheer rose from the midway behind us. The first evening ride lights spun to life. Sophie glanced toward them. Do you still hate Ferris wheels? I never hated them. You turned gray on the sophomore class trip. That was because Reed Thompson rocked the seat. You threatened to report him to the principal. I threatened to report him to gravity. She smiled slowly. Ride it with me. My stomach dipped. Now? Unless you need 7 more years to prepare. There were a dozen reasons to say no. My sister was crying at a raffle table. My mother was somewhere in town unknowingly sitting on the edge of a conversation that would not be gentle. The letter in Sophie's bag felt like a door I had not opened. But Sophie was watching me with a dare in her eyes and something hopeful underneath it. I held out my hand. Lead the way, Caldwell. She looked at my hand for half a second too long before taking it. Her fingers fit between mine like a remembered song. We walked back through the fair hand in hand, past the cider stand and the blue ribbon quilts, and I didn't care who saw. In fact, some foolish, healed piece of me wanted everyone to see, wanted the whole town to know I hadn't turned away from her. At the Ferris wheel, the teenage operator smirked as he locked us into a swinging red seat. Romantic view tonight, he said. Sophie looked at me. Hear that? We've been assigned romance by an expert. I respect his credentials. The wheel jerked upward. Sophie's hand shot out and grabbed my forearm. I grinned. Scared? No. Assessing structural integrity. I'm an architect. It's fine. You design office buildings. Still better than consulting Reed Thompson. The seat rose above the fairgrounds, above the barns and the bridge and all the little glowing booths. Sophie didn't let go of my arm. I didn't ask her to. At the top, the wheel paused. Wind moved gently through her curls. I was so hurt, she said, staring out over the lights. I told myself I wasn't. I told myself I'd been brave and you'd been honest in your own awful way. But I kept wondering what was wrong with me that you couldn't even be kind. I turned toward her as much as the seat allowed. Nothing was wrong with you. She looked at me then, vulnerable and beautiful and close enough that I could count the gold flecks in her eyes. I know that now, she whispered. Mostly. I lifted our joined hands and pressed my mouth to her knuckles. Her breath caught. It was not a kiss, not exactly, but it was a promise made with all the words we still hadn't found. I'm sorry you had to wonder, I said. Her fingers tightened around mine. Then don't make me wonder now. The wheel began to move again, carrying us slowly down through the lights. I kept holding her hand. I won't. At the bottom of the Ferris wheel, the operator lifted the bar and gave us the solemn nod of a man who had personally advanced our relationship. Hope the structural integrity was satisfactory, he said. Sophie stepped onto the platform, still holding my hand. 4 stars, minor emotional turbulence. I'll make a note, he said. I should have let go once we were back on solid ground. Sophie didn't. So I didn't. We walked into the fair lights with our hands linked between us, and the town reacted exactly as expected. Mrs. Keller from the bakery went silent mid-sentence. 2 former football players I barely remembered did double takes. Mr. Jensen raised both eyebrows like I had finally figured out how weather worked. Sophie leaned closer. We are generating a lot of local news. I've always wanted to be a minor scandal. You? Grant Walker, Tense Tree, and Apology Chicken Advocate? I contain multitudes. She laughed and bumped her shoulder against mine. That small, careless touch nearly ruined me. We bought hot cider from a booth run by the high school band, then ended up at a picnic table behind the pie contest tent, where the noise became a warm blur. The sun had dropped, leaving a purple seam along the horizon. Sophie wrapped both hands around her paper cup and steam curled between us. It felt dangerously like a date. Not an accidental reunion, not a discussion of stolen mail and old wounds, a date. So, I said, tell me something about present-day Sophie Caldwell? She tilted her head. I own a pottery studio on Ash Street. Of course you do, What does that mean? It means you were always going to make beautiful things and somehow get clay in your hair? She touched her curls. There is no clay in my hair. I'm speaking spiritually. Her smile warmed, then turned shy at the edges. It's called firefly clay. Classes, custom pieces, mugs mostly. Tourists love mugs. People will buy any mug if you tell them it's handmade and perfect for slow mornings. Is it? What? Perfect for slow mornings. She looked at me over the rim of her cider. You'll have to buy one and find out. There was a promise tucked inside the sentence. Or maybe I wanted there to be. I will, I said. Her gaze held mine a beat longer than necessary. Then she asked, what about you? Present-day Grant? I design office buildings and pretend open-concept workspaces aren't crimes. Are you happy? No one had asked me that in a while. Not casually. Not like they truly wanted the answer. I looked down at my cider. I'm good at it. That was not the question. No, I admitted. It wasn't. Sophie didn't rush in. She just waited, chin propped on her hand, eyes steady on me like I was worth patience. I like parts of it, I said. The lines, the problem solving, taking something empty and making it useful. But sometimes I look at these buildings I helped design and realize no one will ever love them. They'll just work in them and complain about the parking. That sounds lonely. I laughed softly. That sounds accurate. What would you design if no one could tell you no? The answer came faster than expected. A library, a beautiful one. Lots of windows, reading nooks. A children's room shaped like a secret. The kind of place where people come in just to breathe. Sophie's expression changed, opened. There you are, she said. My chest tightened. What? The boy who used to draw buildings in the margins of his history notes. You remember that? I remember a lot about you. The air between us shifted again. I wanted to reach across the table and touch her face. I wanted to ask what else she remembered. I wanted to go back in time and shake my 17-year-old self until he stopped being afraid. Instead, I said, "Can I read it now?" Sophie went still. The letter, I clarified. Only if you still want me to. She set down her cup. For a second, she looked younger, almost the girl who had written it. Then she pulled the plastic sleeve from her tote and slid it across the table. My name stared up at me in blue ink. I unfolded the copy carefully. Dear Grant, in case you ever wondered, I have been trying to figure out how to say this without sounding like I swallowed a romance novel whole. I laughed under my breath, and Sophie covered her face with one hand. Don't editorialize, she muttered. I'm admiring the voice. Read silently, Walker. So I did. The letter was funny at first. She teased me about pretending not to know the answers in English so other people would speak. She confessed she liked how I held doors for everyone, even people who never thanked me. She wrote that, when I caught her falling off the stage, she had been more embarrassed by how badly she wanted me to keep holding her than by the fall. My throat tightened. Then it became braver. I like you. Not in a hallway crush way, though there is also that because you have unfair eyelashes and it is a community problem. I looked up. Sophie was staring hard at her cider. Community problem? I asked. They were very unfair. Were? She gave me one quick, devastating look. Don't fish. I smiled and went back to reading. I don't know if you feel anything like this. Sometimes I think you do, and sometimes you look so far away that I think maybe you're already gone. But if there is even a small part of you that wonders about me too, write back, or call, or show up and say something awkward. I would take awkward from you. I pressed my thumb against the page. At the bottom, in blue ink that had copied lighter than the rest, she had written, "Please don't disappear without telling me if I mattered." I couldn't speak for a moment. When I finally looked up, Sophie's eyes were bright but unspilled. You mattered, I said. Her lips parted. You mattered so much I had to leave town before I did something selfish like ask you to wait for me when I had no idea who I was going to become. You mattered so much I convinced myself silence was noble. I swallowed. It wasn't. It was just fear wearing a decent coat. A tear slipped down her cheek. I was already moving before I thought better of it. I came around the picnic table and sat beside her, close but not trapping her. Hey, she laughed once, wet and embarrassed. I am not crying over a teenage letter next to a pie tent. Technically, you're crying near a pie tent. That distinction helps no one. I reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. I brushed the tear from her cheek with my thumb. Her skin was warm. Her breath caught just slightly, and the sound went through me like a match strike. Sophie, I said, I'm here now. Are you? She asked. The question was soft, but it carried weight. Columbus, my job, her studio. 7 years of almost. I didn't pretend not to understand. I don't know exactly what it looks like, I said, but I know I don't want to walk away from you again. She searched my face. Then she reached up and straightened the collar of my jacket, though it didn't need straightening. I don't want a grand speech and then another disappearance, she said. You shouldn't. I have a life here. I know. I'm not a souvenir from your hometown. The words hit, deserved, and clean. I covered her hand at my collar with mine. You're not. You're Sophie. You make mugs for emotionally complex breakfasts and insult my theatrical range. Her mouth twitched despite herself. I'd like to see you, I said. On purpose, not as a memory, not as unfinished business. As the woman sitting with me right now. Her fingers curled lightly into my jacket. That was dangerously good, she whispered. I've had years to revise. Still, she glanced at my mouth and every thought I had scattered. The fair noise faded again. I leaned in slowly, asking without words. Sophie met me halfway. Our first kiss tasted like cider and powdered sugar and all the years we had lost. It was gentle at first, almost cautious, her hand still fisted in my jacket, my thumb at the soft edge of her jaw. Then she made a small sound, surprised, wanting, and kissed me back like she had also imagined this too many times to be polite about it. When we parted, her forehead rested against mine. Oh, she breathed. I smiled, shaken. Yeah, that would have made senior year impossible. Completely unmanageable. She laughed softly and I kissed the corner of her mouth because I could, because she smiled when I did, because the world had narrowed to the space between us, and finally I was not too afraid to cross it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Sophie drew back just enough to look at me. You can check? I don't want to. That is flattering and impractical. I sighed and pulled it out. A text from Clara lit the screen. Mom's here. She knows Sophie told you. She wants to talk before you leave. The old knot formed in my stomach. Sophie read my face. Your mother? I nodded. She looked toward the fairgrounds, then back at me. Her expression was careful, but her hand found mine under the table. We can go, she said, or we can sit here for 5 more minutes and let you remember you're not 17 anymore. I stared at her. Then I lifted her hand and kissed her palm. 5 minutes, I said. Sophie smiled, small and brave. And for 5 whole minutes, I chose her again. 5 minutes was not long enough. It was barely enough time to memorize the exact shape of Sophie's hand in mine, the faint glaze of cider on her lower lip, the way she kept stealing looks at me like she was checking whether the kiss had been real. It had been real. My whole body still knew it. Okay, she said at last, standing from the picnic table. Let's go be adults. I've been avoiding that since 2017. Then this will be character development. I laughed and she squeezed my hand before letting go. That small loss of contact felt ridiculous and immediate, so I caught her fingers again as we walked. She looked down at our joined hands, then up at me. What? I asked. Nothing. That was not a nothing face. It's just... She smiled in a way that made me feel 16 and 25 at the same time. I used to imagine this, you holding my hand at the fair. My steps slowed. She ducked her head. Too much? No. I tugged her gently closer until our arms brushed. Tell me. Her cheeks pinked. I imagined you'd win me one of those hideous stuffed bears, and I'd pretend it was ugly but secretly keep it forever. I can still make that happen. Grant, those games are rigged. I have an architecture degree and unresolved romantic guilt. I'm unstoppable. That got me the laugh I wanted. We found my mother near the raffle booth, standing with Clara beneath a string of orange paper lanterns. Nora Walker looked smaller than she had in my memory, or maybe I had grown around the fear of disappointing her. Her gray-streaked hair was pinned back, her cardigan buttoned wrong at the top. When she saw Sophie beside me, her gaze dropped to our hands. Pain crossed her face, then guilt. "Grant," she said. "Mom." Clara hovered behind her, eyes red, mouthing, "I'm sorry." My mother looked at Sophie. "Sophie Caldwell." "Mrs. Walker, I owe you an apology." Sophie's fingers tightened around mine, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes, you do." My mother flinched. I loved Sophie for saying it plainly. "I was wrong," Mom said. "I told myself I was protecting him." "You weren't," I said. Her eyes moved to me. "I know that now." "Do you?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. "Because you didn't just throw away a letter, you answered for me. You made her think I was cruel." Mom pressed a hand to her chest. "Your father was drinking so much then. You had just gotten your scholarship. Every time you came home, something pulled you back into our mess. I thought, if you got attached..." "I was already attached." The words rang out between us. Sophie went very still beside me. I turned to her because she deserved to hear it looking at my face, not as collateral damage in an argument. I was. I didn't know what to do with it, and I handled it badly, but I was attached to you before I ever left. Her eyes shone in the lantern light. Mom's voice softened. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." That landed. Her mouth trembled. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Around us, the fair carried on, children laughing, tickets ripping, someone calling for extra mustard at the sausage stand. Ordinary sounds around an old wound. Sophie slipped her hand free. My chest tightened, but then she stepped forward. Not away from me, just forward enough to face my mother herself. "I was 18, Sophie said. "I put my heart in an envelope because I was too scared to say it out loud. And when it came back..." She took a breath. "I believed the worst about myself before I believed the worst about him. That's the part I'm still angry about." Mom's eyes filled. "I'm so sorry." Sophie nodded once. "Thank you." Not forgiveness, not yet. But something honest. I looked at my mother. "We'll talk. Later, not tonight." She swallowed. "Okay. And when we do, I need the whole truth. No protecting me from things I'm old enough to carry." "I understand." I wasn't sure she did, but it was a beginning. Clara stepped forward, hugging herself. "Grant!" I pulled her into a one-armed hug before she could finish. She cried into my jacket for 3 seconds, then shoved me away like affection had violated her brand. "I hate this town," she muttered. "No, you don't," Sophie said. "You love 3 separate lemonade vendors." Clara sniffed. "They each serve a different emotional need." The laugh surprised all of us. It loosened something. I turned back to Sophie. "Can I walk you to your car?" She looked toward the midway, then at me, and a small spark returned to her eyes. "Actually, you owe me an ugly bear." My mother made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I didn't look back. I followed Sophie. Because I could love my family and still choose not to stand in the wreckage all night. Because Sophie was here, warm and real and brave enough to ask for something ridiculous. The ball toss booth was run by a man in a cowboy hat who looked deeply offended by my confidence. "3 balls, $5, he said. Sophie leaned against the counter. "Last chance to preserve your dignity." "My dignity left when you called me a handsome insurance policy." "I stand by the assessment." I missed the first 2 throws completely. Sophie clapped politely. "Very architectural." "The bottles are load-bearing. I'm studying them." "Sure." On the 3rd throw, I clipped the bottom bottle just right. The stack toppled. The booth operator sighed like romance had personally inconvenienced him and handed over a neon purple bear with one eye slightly higher than the other. Sophie accepted it with reverence. He's perfect. He looks haunted. So do most artists. I stepped closer. Are you going to keep him forever? Her teasing faded into something softer. She hugged the bear against her chest and looked up at me. Maybe. The lights from the booth painted her face pink and gold. I wanted to kiss her again. I wanted to ask if I could see her tomorrow, next weekend. Every slow morning after that. I wanted too much too fast. And for once, I didn't hate myself for wanting. Sophie, I said, I leave for Columbus tomorrow afternoon. I know. I can come back next weekend. Her lashes lifted. And the weekend after that, I said. And you can come to Columbus if you want. Or not. We can go slow. We can go awkward. I'm excellent at awkward. You are professionally certified, but I'm not asking for a memory. I touched the purple bear's terrible ear, then let my fingers brush hers. I'm asking for a chance. She stared at our hands. Then she set the bear on the booth counter, rose onto her toes, and kissed me. This kiss was not cautious. It was sweet and sure, her palms sliding up my chest, my hands finding her waist. The fair blurred around us. Someone whistled. I didn't care. Sophie smiled against my mouth, and I felt that smile everywhere. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. There, she whispered. A clear answer in case you ever wondered. I laughed softly and rested my forehead against hers. I'm going to wonder anyway. I have a condition. Pining. Chronic. I'll write you a prescription. She kissed me once more, quick and devastating. Dinner tomorrow before you leave. My heart kicked. That sounds like a date. It is a date. Just confirming. With present-day me, she said. The only one I want. Her smile trembled, but this time it didn't break. We stayed like that for another second, close enough to share breath, my hands at her waist and her fingers curled in my jacket. Then her phone buzzed from her tote. She glanced at the screen and frowned. What is it? I asked. She hesitated, then turned it so I could see. A message from an unknown number filled the screen. You should have left the past alone. Sophie looked up at me, the purple bear between us on the counter, our first date barely promised. But before fear could steal the moment, she reached for my hand again. I'm still going to dinner, she said. I threaded my fingers through hers. So am I. I looked at the unknown number on Sophie's phone, and for one ugly second, the fair lights seemed to dim. You should have left the past alone. Sophie's hand stayed in mine. That was what kept me from turning the moment into a crime scene. Her fingers were warm, steady, choosing me even while uncertainty moved across her face. Do you recognize the number? I asked. No. Could be some bored idiot. Could be, she said, but she didn't believe it. Neither did I. Then Clara appeared beside us, breathless, holding a half-eaten caramel apple like a weapon. Please tell me Mom didn't text Sophie something ominous. I blinked. What? Clara looked at the phone and groaned. Oh, for heaven's sake. You know who sent it? Sophie asked. Clara pinched the bridge of her nose. I have a guess. 10 minutes later, we found the culprit behind the quilt barn. My cousin Len, who had apparently inherited the Walker family talent for making terrible choices under emotional pressure. He was 19, dramatic, and loyal to my mother in the way younger relatives sometimes were when they didn't understand the whole story. I just thought, Len mumbled, everybody was ganging up on Aunt Nora. Sophie stared at him. So you sent a creepy message to a woman you barely know? He winced. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It sounded bad before, I said. Len apologized 3 times. Sophie accepted one and told him to use the other 2 on his future therapist. I'd laughed despite myself, and she shot me a look that said, don't encourage me, which of course only encouraged me. The tension broke there, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. No villain in the shadows, no grand conspiracy. Just the same old mess. Family fear, bad judgment, words sent when silence would have been wiser. My mother apologized to Sophie again before we left the fairgrounds. Sophie listened, then said, "I'm not ready to make this easy for you." Mom nodded, crying quietly. "I understand." Then Sophie added, "But I'm glad Grant knows the truth." So was I. Later, I walked Sophie to her car beneath a sky full of cold stars. She carried the neon purple bear under one arm, its uneven eyes judging both of us. "I feel like he needs a name," I said. "Reginald." "Too dignified." "Fine, Sir Reginald." "Much better." She leaned back against her car door and looked up at me. The fair noise was distant now, muffled by rows of parked trucks and the chirp of insects in the grass. Tomorrow, I would drive back to Columbus. Tomorrow, we would have dinner first. Those two truths stood side by side, one hard, one bright. "I'm scared," she said. The honesty went through me clean. "Me too." "That helps less than you think." "I could lie." "Don't." I stepped closer. "I'm scared I'll mess this up by wanting too much too fast. I'm scared you'll decide the idea of me was better than the actual man who designs morally questionable office spaces." Her mouth curved. "They are morally questionable." "I know. I'm scared," she said, softer now, "that I'll keep waiting for you to disappear even while you're standing right in front of me." I touched her cheek. "Then I'll keep standing in front of you until you believe it." "That sounds exhausting." "I have trained for this, years of chronic pining." She laughed, then turned her face into my palm and kissed it. The gesture was small. It undid me anyway. "I want to try," she whispered. I bent my forehead to hers. "So do I." This time, when we kissed, it felt less like catching up with the past and more like stepping into something neither of us knew how to name yet. Her arm slid around my neck. Mine circled her waist. The purple bear got crushed between us and suffered nobly. When she pulled back, she smiled against my mouth. "Dinner tomorrow. I'll be there. If you're late, I'm assuming you joined the circus." "I'd be a tense tree in the circus." "Typecasting." I kissed her once more because I could, because she wanted me to, because 7 years ago, a letter had been stopped, but this moment hadn't. The next day, I met Sophie at the diner on Main Street. I arrived 20 minutes early. She arrived 10 minutes early and caught me rearranging sugar packets. "Nervous?" she asked, sliding into the booth. "Structurally assessing the table." "Liar." "Yes." We talked for 3 hours. About her studio, my job, her mother's terrible dating advice, my sister's lemonade vendor hierarchy. We did not solve distance over burgers and cherry pie, but we made a plan. Calls on Wednesdays. Visits twice a month. Honesty immediately, especially when it was awkward. At my car before I left for Columbus, Sophie pressed a small handmade mug into my hands. It was deep blue, imperfect in the best way, with a tiny firefly stamped near the handle. "For slow mornings," she said. I ran my thumb over the glaze. "You're making it very hard to leave." "Good," she said, then kissed me like she meant to be remembered all the way down the highway. And she was. By the following spring, my apartment in Columbus had 3 of her mugs, one lopsided bowl and a toothbrush she insisted was not symbolic, which was exactly how I knew it was. I spent weekends in Maple Ridge helping her repaint the studio shelves. She came to Columbus and stood in front of one of my office buildings, squinting. "It's not terrible," she said. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about it." Eventually, I took a job with a smaller firm that let me work partly from Maple Ridge. Not because Sophie asked me to. She didn't. That mattered. I chose it. I chose slow mornings in a town I had once mistaken for a cage. I chose dinner with my mother once a month with boundaries clear enough to breathe inside. I chose teasing Clara about her emotionally complex lemonade needs. I chose walking into Firefly Clay and finding Sophie at the wheel, clay on her cheek, pretending not to smile when the bell over the door announced me. A year after that night at the fair, Sophie and I stood on the covered bridge while the Ferris wheel turned beyond the trees. The harvest lights glowed gold around us. Sir Reginald sat in the front window of her studio now, faded from sunlight and still ugly as sin. Sophie pulled the old letter from her coat pocket. You brought it? I asked. The copy, she said. The original had enough drama. She unfolded it, then handed me a pen. At the bottom, beneath 17-year-old Sophie's final question, I wrote one sentence. You mattered then, and you matter now. Sophie read it, and her eyes filled. This time, neither of us looked away. Then she kissed me under the bridge lights, her hands in my hair, my arms around her, the past behind us and the fair spinning bright ahead. What would you have done if your high school crush found you years later and asked why you never answered a letter you never received? Have you ever experienced something like that? An old message, a missed chance, or a misunderstanding that changed everything? Tell your story in the comments. And for those who'd like to be a little closer to us, we've opened memberships, where you'll get shorter exclusive stories every week with no ads. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.